Hello everyone, welcome. This is Amy, the Mystic Rose Tarot. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't really do discussions or opinion videos, but I've been, when I started like 25 years ago, dealt with traditional roots, like reading books from the 50s and 60s about different kinds of practices that were taking place in the history behind a lot of these practices. And so that's how I was exposed to learning about a little bit about the occult, pagan beliefs, witchcraft, but old school. And so the reason why I decided to create this, which I titled Traditional Tarot, what does that mean to me, is I want to draw attention to more attention to the traditional aspects that I feel that we don't see too much of in the tarot. And I feel it's there's a reason why there are tens and thousands of us tarot, oracle readers, psychics, and out of all those people, there is that small percentage, and I have to say it like this, there is a small percentage of these people that have a natural gift. They can truly connect to it. And the other percentage are just, they're practicing and they just, they kind of just want to learn from it, but they don't have a experienced practice as of yet. So next year, 2021, is going to be a 5-year. Fives are normally known as, in tarot practice, as challenges, conflicts, struggles. But for a 5-year, and the reason why it's a 5-year, 2021, you add those numbers together and it comes to 5. And it deals more with structure, going back to values, traditional values, if you will. And just, I'm not going to say it's like tearing things down and just getting down to the roots of things, but we have to actually maybe step back a bit and see what's been happening and start making changes. But for doing that, we have to go back. We have to take a few steps back to move forward. And I feel that's what's going to happen next year. And next year, tarot card wise, they're birth cards in the major arcana. And you can determine that by adding, there's 2 ways of doing it, by adding your birth date, the month, the day, the year, add those numbers down, reduce them down. And if you get a number that's higher than 10, you have 2 directions to go to choosing your birth card. Either add those 2 numbers together. So if the numbers in your birth date add up to 10, you can consider that to be the Wheel of Fortune card for you, or you can consider it to be the Magician. It's how you gravitate towards those 2 cards, and so on and so forth. So up to 21, you add those numbers up, and then the cycle starts over again. So I don't reduce numbers. If there's a number that comes to 16, I would go to that 16th card in the major arcana and assign that one as my birth card. So that's one way of doing it. You can reduce the numbers down if you get numbers of 10 and up. If you're 1 to 9, you use those numbers, whatever it comes to. For me, next year, I'm the Hierophant. Venus. But primarily, I will focus on the Hierophant, which is going to traditional ways of thinking, of practicing, seeing things. And that's going to be difficult. This is going to be the challenge next year. The Hierophant is going to be expressing to a global community where a lot of people aren't going to listen. And it's going to be challenged. So this guide, the Hierophant, will have a lot of work to do to just express the importance of getting things back to core, putting that discipline in. And that's within ourselves and also spiritually. I'm not saying that there's going to be a spiritual leader next year that could be of influence somewhere along the lines. Who knows? Anything's possible. But at this point, I feel strongly in having that Hierophant card. And I tend to, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I tend to have traditional ways of seeing things and doing things. And I'm careful when I speak in certain circumstances where maybe my view could be a little disruptive to people. But that's something that I have to gauge. And that's the role of the Hierophant. What's the message that you have to say that can maybe turn someone's head to listen and to open the mind and the heart to really listen, we really need to make this change. And people are starting to make this. We do need changes going on at all levels of this planet. So change. So let's use the Hierophant for next year as our guide, and watch out for people who may push too much of those values to the point to where it becomes almost condescending, and it becomes negative, and it could also backlash and prove negative to the person who is trying to send a message. And that message can end up being negative. I lean more towards animal, nature, organic-based decks. So when it comes to that, I like to find decks that just stay very close to nature, very close to the values and the importance of connecting with Mother Nature, or nature-oriented. These are decks that I have that I find strong traditional values in. And I will do my best to explain, from my perspective, the connection I have with these decks. Some of them are more obvious than others because it's visually how the decks are depicted. That there's a traditional look, if you will, for the decks. Some of them have the meanings that just hold so much that I can learn from and do readings from. So the reason why I call this more of a traditional deck is, I'm going to give a backstory to each of the decks and then I'll show it to you, is this deck is a very healing deck. It has references to connecting with the conscious and subconscious, but it deals more with cosmic energy and the influence through chakras, through Eastern philosophy, ways of thinking of getting in touch with ourselves, our true inner selves, but at a different level. And so this for me is a traditional deck because I feel it incorporates traditional ways of healing oneself through, like I said, through yoga, meditation, chakra work, Chakras, chakra work is not new. Energy work is not new. It's been around for a long time. And it's starting to be incorporated into, this is the first card choice. This is the Dreams of Gaia by Ravynne Phelan. This is all about conscious and subconscious work to heal oneself. Past lives. Going back to our youth. Oops, trying to avoid the reflection here. Very simple, very basic. We have roses. There's a lot of traditional symbology that's in this deck that I do enjoy. Okay, these decks are for the most part in order. The Maiden. Rediscovering ourselves through nature. Nature is the purest form of innocence. Nature was there before us. You know, we have grass, we have the trees. They're just there to provide sustenance and life for animals and for us as we came into this planet, until the planet got populated, and now we're seeing where it is right now. So just another aspect of traditional values is just keeping things very simple, going back to basics. And this deck also employs influences of pagan gods and goddesses, but all through nature. Traditional values, all simple ways of working with the tarot. The tools that we work with that can influence us. The wands here. Celtic circle here connected to the tree. We have the raven. These are not modern symbols. In this deck, in a very traditional, I feel respectful manner. So that when you look at this deck, it's just beautiful. And then here we have death and rebirth, the cosmic egg, life and death. All traditional ways of looking at the tarot is the images. This is a very visually informative deck. There is a lot to see in these images, so it's a deck that is going to take time to learn. And this is the Tarot of the Holy Light by Payne Taylor. And I have the list of the decks I'm talking about in the description, so you can follow through. And this is our full. I was looking for a deck, I got this about a year ago, that incorporated alchemy symbology, because I want to explore that, astrology, and Hermeticism, Tree of Life, the Kabbalah. And this deck is considered to be a continental esoteric tarot-inspired deck, because it goes to the early beginnings of how tarot was being practiced, almost in secret societies. So a lot of the images that you see here, and also the astrological associations, they don't go to the Golden Dawn system. The Golden Dawn is more or less wrapped around with the Thoth Tarot, but here the symbology is quite different. The cards in this deck are quite different, but everything still holds back to tradition, which I like. The Hangman's actually one of my favorite cards from this deck. Sure. And then it makes reference to Renaissance. It's a collage deck, as you can see here. Here's the sun. And here it's relating to Pisces. The sun is normally Leo. And I was reading the description for the sun card in particular. And Payne Towler does an excellent job in explaining the cards, because she goes into the history, the philosophy, and the spiritual aspect of the cards. But I could not grasp the meaning as to why Pisces would be of the sun. So the thing I like about this deck is because it's also a non-system deck. It doesn't conform to a particular system. It takes in influences, as I said, of alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah in the deck, but it's something, again, that you will have to spend time. Rest are RWS influenced. Tarot of the Holy Light and Dreams of Gaia, they're their own system. They're specifically created by the artists themselves, and they're used more as guides. Dreams of Gaia can be almost an oracle and tarot deck at the same time. The next deck that I will show you is the Pagan Otherworlds. People who have this deck, they will understand why I'm calling it traditional, because it does hold Renaissance style imagery. It goes a little bit in the direction of the Marseille visually. For the most part, just the imagery and the feel. And I didn't buy the guidebook for this because I didn't feel it was necessary. So I can use an old school feel, old school like RWS look of these cards, and still feel the traditional influence. Now this deck here, the Pagan Otherworlds, I'm actually using it for astrological decons and planets. So I have these cards, and I can read the decans, the decans, for each astrological sign with this deck. Out of all the decks that I have, this is the deck that I can read clearly into decks like this so much more. It's not that I don't like, I'm showing too much of this deck. It's not that I don't like modern decks. I do have one. I think it's only one. I think I have one or two modern decks. And what I mean by modern decks is that I would use primarily. This is kind of pippish here. This is the Ravynne Tarot. This is the deck that I would use for most readings about relationships, business choices, and also spiritual healing. This deck has a lot of tribal energy in it. And how can I explain tribal energy? It's very earthy. It has dark to it. It has light to it. There's an example of dark. And the people depicted in here, they're contemporary. They look young. You tell by their style, the way they look. It's but the deck is not all filled with people, and so it has natural elements to it. Like there's the High Priestess. Not really contemporary looking, but the energy from this deck just works so nicely for me. So this is a deck, in spite of what everyone has said, I do hold great regard to it, and I work with it. And its energy is not traditional. It is Mother Earth. It is dealing with nature, and the tribal part, I guess I should say primitive part, is really getting to the core of who we are, our natural instincts. So anyhow, this deck that I got about 2 years ago, just about, almost 2 years. It's the DreamKeepers Tarot by Liz Huston. And the images in this deck, they have traditional style imagery. She also does dream, surreal work, which I just love. In this deck, it has a little bit of a modern flair to it. Don't know how to explain it, but the meanings through the images still hold tradition. The figures that we see here, they're primarily women. There are men in this deck, but not too many. There's something very simple, very traditional in this deck, which I do adore. But I take the energy that I see and the imagery that I see in this deck, and I internalize it. This deck is a very subconscious deck. We have a lot of dismembering of certain aspects of ourselves. The head is placed in a different position. It's not above, it's below, or it's in the center. The arms are disconnected. The legs are disconnected. There's a disembodiedness that comes in this deck. Here's the Empress, transparent, translucent. You could see right through her. She's pure natural energy. And this is just, it's beautiful, and that's what I look for. So with this deck, we see traditional imagery being used in a photo collage sense. And it's getting the mind, the conscious and the subconscious, I'll hold this card again, to really look deeper. The creatrix is known as the magician. But here we see the different forces that the individual is working with, and or the deck directly there. So Essential Tarot is a very basic, simple deck. I should lift the light here. So you may think, what's traditional about this deck? Traditional, it's using very basic, it's using the tools that we see here in the Minor Arcana. See the sword, the wand, the cups, and the pentacles. And it's putting it in a different dimension. And it's only pulling elements of each archetype. We have the cross and the moon. The high priestess deals with spirituality, but it's more inner, deep, subconscious spirituality. And then we have the moon as the star of influence. And then we have the colors. We have it going from blue to violet, using very traditional symbology, the colors to influence. And also the dimension. And what I'm saying about the dimension is just this. We have the doorway here. Here we go, the Empress. We have Venus, the heart, and the crown. Very simple. My word for the day, traditional symbology. You can read so much more with very basic, simple information. Now, some people may think this is boring, but if you're serious about the tarot and you want to learn different aspects of reading, this is not a boring. And the plane changes here. Throughout this deck, there are different cards or different bars. The position of the bars move. And that could be a form of conscious, subconscious energy movement. So you have to really look at this deck and to see what really is going on. Again, here we have the Fool. Very basic, very simple. That's how we start out with. And then there's no color in it. And then we start building up from the major and minor arcana. Here's one more. See, so now our gray bar is in the center. We have the Nine of Wands. It's a wonderful deck too. I'm taking it very easy with this deck. This is the Unified Esoteric Tarot. And this is purely a traditional influence deck where it's working with astrology, the basics of astrology, the elements, the alchemy, symbology. And it's actually broken up, this deck in particularly. You could break this deck up into seasons, the 12 astrological houses. You could do them planetary-wise through the Tree of Life. Slightly different. And again, this is a non-conforming deck. This is a deck where the artist created his own system, Attila Blaga. He's worked on this deck for, I believe, 25 years, not the deck, but the system that he created specifically for this deck. And it's a deck that astrologically you get a different perspective. And it's similar to Tarot of the Holy Light. It has its own astrological correspondences, its placement. The decans are placed differently in the Tarot of the Holy Light. You could break this down into the astrological signs. For the planets, the Tree of Life. I'm going to show you that card very quickly. And I have labels on this here as well. So we have Mars and Cancer. We will see planets in this deck that are not normally placed in specific astrological signs. So this may take people who are used to astrology as we know it and the placement 10 years ago. And the packaging was different and whatnot. But again, I'm not going to do a full review. This is specifically focusing on the traditional aspects of the decks that I have. This one's called The Witch's Oracle by Sally Morningstar. And this is the card I actually pulled just the other night, the cloak. So this is influenced again with pagan and witchcraft traditional values. And for the most part, craft work, not the band, spiritual craft work and pagan work deals with deities, connecting with Mother Earth, nature, using those resources for healing in various ways. And throughout this deck, I'll just show one more card because, like I said, I have to do a review of it. Very basic images using traditional symbology, especially within the pagan practice. So I found this deck clearly to be perfect for me for this month because I can use it for Halloween, for spirit work. I can also do it outside of Halloween. I can use this deck throughout the year, and it works very nicely. It's, I think it's 42 cards, so it's not a heavy, it's not a large oracle deck, but the images that they have here work. It's very simple, and I will show you the book very quickly. So just to kind of go back, traditional values and imagery is what I look for, that kind of energy. And so the decks that I showed you here today have various forms of connection to spirit through nature, through pagan craft practices, through astrology, but traditional going back. And again, I feel it's so important as you build your practice to read books, read these older books. Read the books that came out in the 60s and 70s. They will come backwards. They will come across backwards to you. And you have to keep in mind that that was the time that it was written. So I've seen some comments where people look at a book that was written in the 60s and they're like, oh, it's so feminist, it's so, it's so old school, it's nothing like us, I can't relate to it. And I go, well, that's good, but you have to know where the source came from originally, because traditionally, this is where all this stuff came from. We have to look back. Don't think tarot is new. Like it was just discovered in the last 5-10 years. There's thousands of decks out there, and they all hold historic meanings. And that's of course your choice. You find a deck that works with you and connects with you and you can relate to it, that's your deck. But I'm just stating this. If you're building a tarot practice, go back to the roots. Go back to see where all this came from. Look at the influences. And it's wonderful to see people who are embracing Marseille decks. Not so much to collect them, but I like to see, because I'm going to be learning Marseille. I don't know Marseille. My system has always been Rider-Waite-Smith. And I'm going to be learning Marseille style very soon. And so that's a different system, but I can at least apply the experience that I have to that deck. And then I'm going to learn from there, how to apply that into the Marseille. So there's always room for growth and knowledge, hands down. So that's what traditional tarot means to me. It's going back to the roots and looking traditionally of different meanings from different, but I'm just trying to put the years of experience that people have had with the tarot. And you can see a mature deck versus a deck that's a little bit more on the younger side. So you connect with those decks. And that's another way you can connect. You know, it's just like the imagery you relate to because it's young and whatnot, contemporary. And traditional doesn't mean that you're old, but there are people who have traditional decks and they're young. But it just goes to show where you hold your values the most, where you respect them the most. Okay, that's it. I'm an hour in. This is Amy, the Mystic Rose Tarot. It's on my profile here on YouTube, Instagram, the Mystic Rose Tarot, www.themysticrosetarot.com. I will see you soon. Thank you for watching, and